We are living through the same exact crisis that every single empire faced before falling. See, we're going to discuss in this video religion in today's world, and we're going to go ahead and look at historical warnings that we are ignoring. Well, what you guys know is that every single empire collapses the same exact way: moral decay, division, and the rejection of absolute truth. Who said this? Well, Edward Gibbon, he actually wrote the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, made it really, really clear. The second that we no longer understand what is true and what is false is the moment that we find ourselves in an extremely tough situation, because what we're able to do, if we can take the most basic truths and make them disappear, well, then all of a sudden, what can we do with the less concrete things? Before you know it, nothing is real and nothing has meaning. If we take a look at, for example, Rome replaced its discipline with comfort. Rome used to be one of the most disciplined societies in the ancient world. In fact, it was the most disciplined society in the ancient world. They, through their discipline, were able to conquer most of the entire continent. And the crazy thing is, once you got to the top, their comfort level ultimately led them to their fall. And that might look a lot like what's happening today in America, where you might look to your left and right and you have all these people who no longer feel there's a need to defend the country that they have. Well, that's because they weren't part of building it and they're comfortable. That's why people want to move into socialism. That's why people want to have a society where everything is given away for free. But we already understand that wealth is truly built when a society produces. And when a society stops producing, they stop providing value. See, what happened in Rome is starting to happen here with things like social media, where entertainment actually becomes more important than character. Does that sound familiar? And so, what does that really mean? Well, societies start to abandon their spiritual foundations. It's about having a moral compass. Now, we could say that there is an objective moral compass that most people follow. But if you don't have something that is bound and focused and locked in by God, well, then it's really up to the masses. What I mean is, whatever the majority of people in a society deem to be appropriate is, in fact, what then is appropriate. Whatever feels good for everybody. And that's why you have all these different people who feel like they need to be included in something, even though the reality is many of them really need a whole different type of help. I'll give you an example. There was an individual, and I won't go into the details, and I don't have the sources pulled for this, but this individual was a convicted sex offender. They had actually raped a child. They raped a 5-year-old, and then they raped a 13-year-old, and then they went to prison both times. And then they were in prison the second time, and because they now said that they were a woman and not a man, they requested to be moved into a woman's prison, which they were. And then because of the woke agenda, this individual opted to have breasts implanted, and he was able to get breasts and be moved to a woman's prison, who this is a convicted rapist. And so this is extremely important to understand that these type of social norms that we accept allow for these barbaric situations to happen. Even though they're not incredibly common, they're still prevalent, they're still relevant, they still occur. These are real things. And so when a society loses its spiritual foundation, it loses its identity. And that's exactly what you're starting to see here in this country. See, the reality is that every major religion warned that nations fall when people drift from God. For example, in Christianity, the book of Hosea chapter 4 verse 6 says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." And in Judaism, Deuteronomy 8 says, "Forgetting God leads to destruction." And even our brothers in Islam with Quran Surah 7 179 says, "People become blind to truth by their own choices." See, all three Abrahamic religions all can agree at least on the fact that a nation falls when it drifts from God. Now, the understanding of what God is completely different in all three, but that's not the point. The point is there has to be a moral absolute. See, modern society, it worships new gods. Some of those new gods are self, money, pleasure, politics. So if you guys haven't, check out a book by Emily Durkheim, which is actually called The Elementary Forms of Religious Life. It's an excellent read. And so I bring this up because I want you to know that a society without truth becomes a society without limits. And so imagine a world where anything is possible, where dogs can be men and men can be dogs. Now that might sound far-fetched, but I'm pretty sure I saw a video last week of a person pretending to be a dog. That's real. And no one steps in to say anything about it anymore because we have a society that is growing toward a limitless fixture. And history shows that this leads to things such as violence and oppression. Nazi Germany rejected moral law. That equaled a genocide. When that happened and there was a minority within the German populace that was really conducting all of the evil deeds, the individuals who were a part of that society that were German, they just turned a blind eye. And that's a lot what's happening today is people who are not currently affected or they're on the better side of history, they feel okay to just simply turn a blind eye. So we have to think about the fact that technology has a huge part in this. Technology expanded our knowledge base, but really what it did was it destroyed our wisdom because people know more than ever, but they understand less than they ever have before. And then we have to think about how mental health is actually collapsing in this entire thing as well. Because right now there is a spiritual hunger that people are trying to reach out for, trying to move toward because they are feeling so empty inside. In fact, Generation Z is burning on fire for God. See, the reality is that depression is actually up by 50% globally. And millions are returning to religion across the world. And that actually comes directly from the World Health Organization and the Pew Research Lab. So we're not really progressing. We're actually just repeating the final stage every empire entered before it collapsed. I'll leave you with this. Religion isn't dying. Religion's actually rising from the ruins of a world that's losing its soul. Just some food for thought.